With hold to block in Chivalry 2, faking out your opponents with feints is an art form, and it's always a great feeling to see your enemy take the bait and bite on a feint. And if you've ever watched me live or you watch some of my clips, you'll notice that I regularly make the got ya call before I even land the final strike. I'm Strider the Champ, and in today's video, I'm going to teach you guys some of my favorite and most successful feint attacks, along with some tips and tricks to be more successful in bamboozling your enemies. Chivalry 2 is much more similar to real combat sports like MMA or boxing than you would think. Just like in the real world, a straight linear strike is harder to read than a wide looping attack. I like to apply this concept to my Chivalry game by prioritizing stabs and overhands more in my feinting combinations than wide slashes, which are the easiest strikes to block and read in the game. For my first and favorite feint attack, we'll keep the weapon in front of our body the entire time, making the attack harder for our enemies to read. On this combo, we'll be feinting a stab into an overhand strike, and this is a feint you'll see me use in many of the clips I show on my channel. Since the sword never actually leaves the center of your character's body, your opponents will never get the clear tell that a feint is coming, like when you feint into a slash. Now, bonus tip number one in this and all feints is to remember to sell your feints. This means don't just go immediately mouse button down to mouse button up, but to let the initial stab animation play a bit before changing the attack. My second tip is I find that as I switch my attack from a stab to a overhead, dropping into a crouch will break my enemy's line of sight and throw them off as my overhead strike comes from down at their waistline and crashes into their head. Bonus tip, if you're using a weapon that does a lot of stab damage like the longsword, just reverse this combination from an overhead to a stab. Our next feint attack I very rarely see used in game, and I think not many players know how to even do it, and that is a stab to a stab. Again, by keeping the weapon in front of our body, opponents have a very difficult time reading the attacks. Now, to perform a stab into a stab, after initiating your first stab by pulling the mouse wheel down, hold the Alt key while once again pulling the mouse wheel down to enter a stab from the opposite direction. This is an underutilized mechanic in the game, and since opponents rarely see players use it, they'll fall for it very often. Now, on the same topic of using the Alt key, you can perform this feint also with an overhand strike by using the mouse wheel up rather than down. I find this feint also is very rarely used, and it'll throw your enemies off for a free hit. Now, a feint guide would not be complete without the classic turtle breaking combination of a slash into a stab. This is the number one way to beat newer or poor players who will not release block. We force them to hold their block by telegraphing a slash attack and then feint it into a kick before smacking them in the head with our axe for a free follow-up shot. This combination will work less on more experienced players, but still is highly effective in 64-player servers. And lastly, let's talk about how to use the slash to slash feints. And this works so well with those slower weapons like a greatsword or executioner axe. And when performing the slash to slash, since the attacks are easier to read, we want to focus on really selling that feint by not going straight from one to the other. Especially when using the greatsword, like I said earlier, you can change the attack very, very late in the swing. I fake out so many players when I use the greatsword with these super slow feints. It's really very confusing when the attack animation cancels so late. Now, the danger when performing a move like this with a slow weapon is that a fast weapon, like a one-handed sword, can sometimes still land first even when the enemy falls for the fake and gamble, so be careful using this attack against those one-handed fast weapons. Now, before you go, please let me know in the comments what is your favorite feint combination. Like the video and be sure to join the Angels by subscribing. Champ out.